This little episode, this chapter, is going to be about worms, orme, dragons, and similar epic weird beings from mythology, mainly Scandinavian, but I am going to touch on the subject of other slithering, stomping, flame-throwing monstrosities. Here there be dragons. So in Nordic language we have this word, orm, which is very close to the English worm, worm, worm. And in Anglo-Saxon you have worm. And modern day, if you say the word worm, people think of earthworms and just think of these slithering, creepy, crawly creatures on the asphalt, forgetting the fact that Charles Darwin spent the main part of his remaining years studying mainly earthworms because they turned out to be one of the most important life forms on the planet. If you don't know why, Google it, find out, educate yourself. The planet's quite important, the whole environmental thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but the world is on fire. Back to the art at hand and the etymological nerderies. Dragons and worms and lindorms and stuff like that, they tend to exist in every mythology that you come across. In big parts of Asia, dragons are friendly, benevolent, intelligent, mighty creatures. In Scandinavian mythology and Anglo-Saxon mythology, Christian mythology with the serpent and all these things in the Garden of Eden, bad guys. Russia, they have the Shmei or Shmeya, mighty giant dragons in some cases, other cases weird shape-shifting dragon kind of beings. No matter what, they tend to exist. Often they are creatures of mountainous might and power. And in many cases I feel they exist in myth and magic and mythology simply to create antagonists powerful enough to create a challenge for heroes that are beyond the might of normal men, but who are at the same time not supposed to go and oppose the gods. So here's a bad guy, he's got no real legs and body to speak of, it's just really greedy, malicious, will steal your daughter and hide her in a tower that it'll swivel around, and you, SIGURD, has to go and get your name and its treasure, kill it, SIGURD Fabulous Bane, stuff like that. These stories tend to pop up all over Europe for different reasons. In Scandinavia, we even named the ships after worms, while at the same time being terrified of the mightiest ones, such as Jormungandr, the world serpent, and the other one, Nidhogg, eating away at the roots of Yggdrasil. Painful, biting bastard that he is. Why are these creatures so important, and why are we using them for tattoos? Really good question. Why do dragons come into play in all of these storylines? Honestly don't know, and how do people even come up with them? I mean, you'd have to specifically meet a rather large snake to get the idea. But then again, if you meet a rather small snake and it's venomous and killed your friend, you might come up with the idea that these are terrifying creatures and they could be ginormous and then be thereby terrifying. The idea of world serpents, of Ouroboros and Tiamat, for example, godlike beings, if not gods themselves, have popped up all over the planet for different reasons, in different connotations. They're all mighty. Some are good, some are bad. We already established that. Why for tattoos? Why do I use them for tattoos? People tend to want them as either antagonists of heroes. I've done quite a few pieces where it's Thor fishing for Jormungandr, the world serpent, or just because they are epic, powerful, mighty beings. They like empower the body, they flow well with the skin. There's like a physical and artistic poetry about them. So, been playing quite a lot with these beings, and in Scandinavian art, in Viking Age artwork, they show up time and time again. Sometimes they have legs, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they look like silly deer. Other times they actually look really terrifying. We know they were used for ships' prows, these big bowhead things on the ships that were mounted to possibly scare away the enemy or scare away evil spirits. There's debate about what these heads actually did, but they do tend to show up again and again and again. And at the same time, there seems to be quite a big difference between worms and actual snakes, because there's a lot of depictions of actual snakes, and snakes are often mentioned in the mythos and magic. For example, snake hanging over Loki, dripping venom down on him, and every time he convulses when his wife empties the bowl of venom that she's using to save his measly skin, he convulses, the world shakes with his pain and anguish. Hyrukin riding in on a wolf using snakes as reins. That was the word I couldn't remember for another video we did. The reins. Brain. Anyways, why did I have one tattooed on myself when I started my career in Nordic tattooing? Originally I had a Nordic dragon worm on my right arm. This has now politely been covered up by Gerhard Wiesbeck in all his cunning of inquiry. I had it done because at the time I was doing reenactment, steel weapon fighting. I liked the idea of having like the biting serpent on my arm and this powerful imagery of it. But as time went by, I also became tired of the aggression, this whole signal of rage and venomousness that worms have and are. I did not feel that it was something that belonged on my skin. So eventually I had it incorporated into like a half body Yggdrasil that I have on my front, and arms and legs and head and neck for that matter. It's all like one big dark ornamental piece. But that absorbed the somewhat angry snake. Ragnar Lothbrok dies. Sorry if you're watching Vikings and you haven't made it that far, it's a pretty important part of the myth. Ragnar Lothbrok dies in what is called a worm pit, Ormegol. In Scandinavian language, Orm can both be the mighty battle dragon-y beasties or slithering serpents, things with venomous bites. He dies in one of those that's full of snakes with venomous bites. So, yeah, snakes, worms. There's a big difference between what is what, although often you're left guessing as to what is what. There's good examples, especially from the Urnes style and the Ringerike style, of snakes and worms in the same depictions. It should be mentioned that there's also a theory of, for example, Viking raids being defined as worms of somewhere. Sockburn. Why would you ever name a place Sockburn? There's something called a Sockburn worm. That's believed that it might have been a metaphor for a Viking Age raid, according to a gentleman named Hutchinson, who was, I believe, a historian in Durham, which is that way. Actually, not that far, and actually that way. Then again, you're sitting in front of a computer somewhere else, so you have no idea which way I'm facing. South from where I am. When depicting Viking Age worms and dragons, you can either, of course, stick to the material already present, the historical content, or you can come up with stuff. There's plenty of space to play around because there's quite a versatility. There's a few do's and don'ts, but as with everything, I believe that don'ts are meant to be somewhat kicked out the door. This is about creativity and having fun and creating beautiful art, and I don't really believe in this whole dogmatic approach. But when playing around, I find it... when playing around with art, thank you for laughing at that one, Haywood. When playing around with this artwork, I tend to choose a specific era to stick to, because it's nice to keep it within one art form, one art language. This isn't an absolute. I sometimes divert from it, as you will see in the reel of dragony worms, if you can spot it. And in the books that I'm doing, there will also be a manual on how to come up with worms, really, like bits and pieces, and how to implement, and how I do jaws, and when do I put teeth in, and when don't I put teeth in. How to create a fierce look, and how to create worms that look absolutely goofy, because they happen to. There's quite a lot of worms on carvings that look perpetually surprised, as if they're being fondled by the gods. So, this video from here and off will just be a little show reel of dragons that I've done through my career. Some of them, I should mention, have done crazy things to my career. One of them even ended up being a meme. It's weird when your tattoos become memes, but it was a pretty good one, so why not? Okay, so a fun little thing to add. The idea of dragons and worms is genre setting. It's shown up through mythology and so on throughout the planet, but it has just become pop culture. Smaug the Dragon, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Dungeons and Dragons, Harry Potter. It's everywhere. And I mean, in the Viking Age, if you're out sailing and you see a pod of whales in the distance, that could easily look like the back of dragons, or one dragon just curving through the waters. And these creatures are just, they show up everywhere in local myth and ideas, Loch Ness and so on. Even Lewis Carroll's The Jabberwocky, silly weird creature that it is, but it's there. It shows up all the time. It's been popularized, and it seems to have been around for a very, very long time. I'm going to predict that dragons are here to stay. And it's fun to think about what in one culture is so dark and gloomy and evil and steals your daughter, and in other cultures are divine beings that will help everyone. It's almost a shame that we've made them into such bad guys. Also, vague, weird theory. Imagine that you're digging out big hole where you're going to build a castle foundation, and you come across bones, really big bones from dinosaurs. Dear Christians, they're not fakes, they're real, just so you know, because no one would bother faking that many bones and leaving them in museums all over the world. Dinosaurs, they were here before Adam and Eve. You are a castle architect, you're digging a giant pit, not yourself, your slaves are doing that, of course, and you come across a giant thigh bone. Here there be dragons.